Welcome to the CatholicPsych Show, Monday morning. How was your weekend, Dr. Greg?
Pretty good. Pretty good weekend. Lots of great stuff happening in the world today. People still talking about that interview like nonstop. But it was good. We got some stuff done at the house. Really enjoying the spring turning into summer here. Things in bloom, planting some flowers and taking care of stuff out in the yard, playing with the kids, having fun. Good weekend.
It's great.
How about you?
Uh, um,
Wait, what are we talking about today?
we're going to talk about Taylor Swift, the Church of Taylor Swift. We're going to talk about the Catholic Church, too. Might as well. The Pope had an interview on 60 Minutes, as well as lots of other little comments. Some major shifts in the geopolitical landscape, which I know very little about, but we should just at least mention the president of Iran died in a helicopter crash. Not sure what that means for all of us, but
I saw that on your list of topics. I have not actually even heard about that yet, so that's going to be interesting. But so I know we just want to tease the topics, but what I am interested in how your weekend was.
Oh, yes. It was a good weekend. I had a lot of time with the kids. I let my wife go have some fun with some of her friends. So I was on a lot of dad duty on Saturday, which was great for a time.
Well, you sound like you could give a commencement speech at a conservative Catholic college. You let your wife go have time with her friends.
Oh man, please don't take that out of context. I was happy that my wife was able to go spend some time with her friends. I did not give her permission. She wanted
I had
to
to.
go.
It was just low hanging fruit. I had to jump on that.
It's a little. I gotta let my tea settle in a little bit, get the caffeine going before I'm ready to battle all of woke culture right now. Let's talk about Taylor Swift. Okay, so I want to talk to you about this on Friday, but the kicker story went on so long. The commencement speech story went on so long. We didn't get to touch upon it, but so about 12,000 Taylor Swift fans reportedly flocked to a historic church in Germany the previous Sunday to attend worship services featuring the megastar's music, the Church of Taylor Swift. The Church of the Holy Spirit in Heidelberg held 2 Swift-themed services on Sunday entitled Anti-Hero Taylor Swift Church Service. We're worshiping Taylor Swift's music now. Organized
Well,
the 16th.
are we using Taylor Swift's music for worship of Jesus Christ and the Holy Trinity, or are we worshiping Taylor Swift?
It's an interpretation. So theologically speaking, she points to the justice of God, for her faith and action are inseparable. So the service were attended by 12. Were well attended with about 1,200 people showing up. The audience skewed younger and more female than typical. Yeah, so I think it has to do with ideas of social justice. That was the theme, like her theological interpretation of God around themes of social justice. In front, a band-led worship with 6 Swift songs, a rainbow banner behind them on stage let visitors know that the church welcomed all sizes, all colors, all cultures, all sexes, all beliefs, all religions, all ages, all types, all people. So it's like a certain version of Christianity filtered through Taylor Swift music. And it was very well attended, 1,200 people. What are your initial thoughts on this?
Well, I'm still trying to understand it. So it's a Christian church.
It's a Christian church, but it was a service where the music was all Taylor Swift music with a live band and emphasized aspects of Taylor Swift's music that are consistent with an emphasis on social justice themes.
I mean, I actually don't even know what would be worse. I don't know if it would be worse if it was actually like a new church to worship Taylor Swift, or a Christian church using her music for these themes.
I think the former would be worse. I think actually worshiping her would be worse.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of just more clear. It's like, this is what we're doing. Like, let's just be really obvious about it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, is there a real difference? I mean, in some sense, there's probably like an unconscious worship of Taylor Swift, which is why there was so much attendance at the service.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think, I mean, it makes perfect sense that the world is completely starving for spiritual grounding and reality. And
Sure.
there's no way to make sense of how how we're made for the eternal, but then we're in this environment that is just constantly brainwashing people to not see anything eternally good. And we got to create like ways to feed that need with like social justice.
Yeah.
And then that becomes the thing.
Yeah, I think too there's something natural about music that gets underneath our consciousness, and it connects with our unconscious, and there's like a counterpoint for our interior experience based on music. And I think her music is, if a good artist can make music general and as widely applicable, such that, at least in her case, what is it? It's a lot of like teenage angst, but like the themes help me feel less alone. It's almost as if like the artist can understand what it's like inside of me. You know, it's not our parts, it's not our manager parts, the parts of ourselves that we put out to the world. Music bypasses all that and gets to the more parts of ourselves that have more emotional resonance. So it almost feels like a spiritual experience, which lends itself towards worship. You look confused.
No, I'm just processing what you're saying. I mean, I can get into that, but it's just horrific.
Horrific.
We're bypassing our reason, we're bypassing the intellect, we're bypassing like any kind of actual sort of human capacity for participation in something that is really good and beautiful and true. And instead, it's just like this base sort of connection to some deep potential for need.
Yes.
And it's like, doesn't matter who's filling the space.
Yeah. Can you say that again in simpler language?
I don't know. I got to think about it. I'm just processing it for the first time.
Sure.
Thinking about
Well, I think about like the Grateful Dead, and like Grateful Dead become a religion for people, and it becomes like going to like
I think
following.
it's disgusting when that happens. It's terrible. It's horrible. Like, what is it? It's like a science experiment where you're looking at rats and you're like, oh, they keep hitting the lever for the cocaine. And it's like, look it, they really want cocaine. Is it like, okay, what's the point here? You're showing them, oh, actually, this cocaine is so much stronger in their brain that they'll give up food for it.
Right. It doesn't mean it's good for them.
Like, what are you saying? Like, so what? Okay, so you're using Jerry Garcia instead of cocaine, or Taylor Swift instead of cocaine. I'm like, we're not talking about
cocaine.
mice. We're talking what?
Or with cocaine.
With cocaine.
With cocaine.
We're not talking about mice, though. We're talking about the human person and the capacity for the deep, eternal relationship with God. And I think this is horribly disgraceful.
I think it's sad. In the absence of spirituality and religious faith, we're religious beings, so we're gonna find something to worship, even if it's sold out stadiums with 80,000 people, and there's this one person on stage that everyone's emotionally moved by. It feels like worship. The content isn't, but on a process level, it feels like worship. And so this church is just like, let's just make it explicit. We're doing a worship service.
I mean, there's always two sides to this, but it's always like, so when there are these articulations, when people are manifesting this like behavior, and then on one hand you could be like, see, we're made for worship. Like there's something inherent in the person that like we want to worship things. It's like, okay, that's great. But at the same time, this reality is a very clear reminder of how off-kilter people really are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Tony Robbins. You ever see the documentary on Tony Robbins? I'm sure I've talked to you about it. With it's called I'm Not Your Guru.
Yes. You've talked to me about it. I haven't seen it.
It's so good. I love this. I love the documentary, and they show these events, and it looks like a Steubenville summer conference, people's arms in the air, people shouting and crying and having conversions, and it's like all this stuff, and you're like, it's like so innate in humanity. People, like, you could take a picture at a Tony Robbins conference, you could take a picture at a Steubenville conference, and you would not be able to distinguish between the two until you show like the Eucharist in the front or Tony Robbins in front.
Yes, but he's saying, I'm not your guru. He doesn't want that kind of worship, right?
Well, okay, whatever. That's just, it's really good marketing.
What, to help people like see that they have their own answers. That's
one of the best hero journey narratives. It's like the sort of what's it, begrudging, not begrudging, but he's sort of like, didn't really want to be the savior, doesn't really want to be the president, doesn't really want to be the guy who has all the answers, but I'll take on this burden, and I'll do it for culture and society. I'll do it for the people. Sure. It's like one of the most lovable hero stories there is.
Sure. Right. And if you lead with arrogance, I mean, people are going to be turned off. So you have to lead with humility.
Right.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. But so, I mean, Taylor Swift is kind of the same way, right? She's like, every girl, it's like that, it's just your neighbors, your friend. It's like, she'll show up at your wedding maybe. She spent like a decade doing what Gary Vee calls her, like, one of the most brilliant marketers. He talks about her all the time. Like, she'll just get into DMs and answer people. She'll send people birthday gifts. She went to people's weddings.
Yeah, she builds community.
When she was invited.
Yeah, she builds community.
So it's like, oh, she's just like your, just the normal American girl. And then she's like, all right, I'll be a superstar, rock star, pop star. Sure.
Yeah, it's upsetting. I mean, the having a worship service which promotes a pop singer's themes and ideals is upsetting to me. It upsets me. It's just misguided, and I just want to help people understand that she's not God, and her themes are not going to lead you to peace and happiness and joy and freedom.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's a lot of mixed up people who have who are lost.
Yeah.
They end up at a Taylor Swift service.
I do. I always love, like, JP2's, when he, his quote, his like super famous quote. He's like, it's not, when you're seeking for happiness, it's Jesus who you're seeking.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's what they're looking for.
Like, we can obviously use that, but then, yeah, we just have to figure out, like, where's the pivot? Where's the offer? Where's the proposal?
Right on. All right. Well, let's go to an actual clerical figure and an actual church, the Holy Father, Pope Francis. Did you actually watch the whole 60 minutes or no?
I did not.
Excerpts or? Okay.
I didn't watch anything really.
Okay.
I watched the one excerpt of him making that comment about conservatives.
That's the most controversial. I mean, do you want to start there, or you want to build up to that?
I got nothing else to talk about unless you bring it up. So you tell me.
Okay, so he clarified some of his thoughts on the same-sex union blessings.
Oh,
right, which is a little bit more. It's consistent with, I believe, the way you interpreted it. So he said, "What I allowed was not to bless the union. This cannot be done because this is not the sacrament. But to bless each person, yes, the blessing is for everyone. To bless a homosexual type union, however, goes against the given right, against the law of the church. But to bless each person, why not? The blessing is for all. Some people were scandalized by this, but why?"
Well, gosh, there's so much to talk about with Francis, always Pope Francis. It's like, it's always two sides to this, but on one hand, I think the media and, just all the different narratives are so skewed, and people are just clickbait fiends.
Yeah.
So as soon as something gets presented in a controversial way, pick your side, line up.
Yeah. And here he is front and center on American television, an American media outlet on 60 Minutes, very popular, in saying, I'm not blessing same-sex couples. He could not have been more like unequivocal about it.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that's going to alter. Well, I would say if he left it at that, that may have changed some people's perspectives on him. If he just offered that mere clarification from his own lips.
Right.
But there are some other issues he talked about.
Well,
He talked
so
about
I mean, I just think, just in general, though, off of this first topic, he's so out of touch.
He's out of touch, you think?
He's completely out of touch.
Why say that?
Well, he has, like, for him to say why, like, why are people having a problem with this? It's like, well, if you actually listen to anybody who's trying to explain to you why, maybe you would not have to ask the question. His language was so sloppy and misleading and confusing. And when you're a public spokesman and you use language that is confusing, you actually are creating a situation that you are responsible for.
Yes.
He's not some innocent bystander who's just sort of curiously, astonished at, oh my goodness, like why are people having problem with the science of whatever, or why are people having trouble with this historical narrative? Or it's like, no, people are having problem with your words that you said about something that's actually really sensitive and deep.
And his words carry tremendous weight. I mean, to not have sensitivity to that fact that everything he says carries with it a certain authority and all eyes are on him.
Yes.
And when he says things that are open to interpretation, which have a level of implicit controversy to them, I don't understand his surprise either.
Like my interpretation of that document was because I started from the premise that the Pope can't be wrong, which for whatever reason was not the premise that everybody else or most people decided to start from.
Right.
So it's like there's that I don't think I'm really special by having that premise. But if you start from that premise and then you're like, all right, maybe his language is sloppy, but is it heretical? Let me try to think about this in terms of what wouldn't be heretical. And then I tried really hard. Like, it took a while. It took a lot of prayer and reflection and really sort of like analyzing the words in the document and looking at different translations and like really trying to understand it. And after all that work, because I started from the premise that the Pope is not heretical, I was able to see like, oh, okay, there is a very significant difference between using the word couple and using a word like union. And the Pope did not say union. He said couple. Does that matter? Yes, it actually does matter. It's the difference between heresy or not. And then the Pope comes around later and says, you can't bless a union, but he's acting like he's surprised. It's like, he's like, oh, why are people of course you can't bless a union. Like, what? Like, what? This is a kind of gaslighting, honestly. If it's a little bit off.
Well, I think people push back against what he has to say because once upon a time, there's the concept of infallibility surrounding the Pope. And that was clarified to mean on certain issues when he speaks ex cathedra from the chair, that the teaching is actually infallible, like the Immaculate Conception. Like, if you don't believe in the Immaculate Conception, you are not Catholic, right? And so that clarification was made. That's not to say that's like a level of doctrine that's infallible, which is different than other things. So I think people took the other things to be somewhat negotiable. Other kind of teachings, encyclicals, things could change.
Yeah,
so
but no, other things like, no, encyclicals can't, like there's a hierarchy of dogma, but infallibility is not just black or white. It's not only with dogma. So if you have things like encyclicals, or if you have statements made by the Department of the Vatican that is meant to safeguard the faith,
the congregation,
like the deposit of the faith,
of
the dicastery that he renamed it, but it's so they're supposed to, like, that's their whole purpose,
right?
And they're the ones who put out the document.
So we believe that anything that comes out from that office,
that's infallible.
It's infallible.
So that's
the Holy
what I'm saying.
Spirit
Like,
the Holy Spirit safeguards that.
Yeah, if that was mistaken, we'd be in a really bad situation.
Sure. Well, that's why people feel like they're living in a time of absolute chaos where they can't trust the leaders of the church.
Right. But the media has created this situation. The media, because it's like people have listened to him talk on airplanes with these off the cuff comments. It's like, first of all, of course he's not infallible in anything that he says. And of course he's not, and he's not even, and, you know, and then the media like blows that up and it's like, oh, well, he said this about homosexuality on an airplane in an interview. And that's how he like started his whole papacy. And then that just created this narrative. So now people are looking for him to be a heretic.
Yes.
So Pavel is saying not everything from the DDF is infallible either. I might be wrong on that, but I'm not. What I'm saying is that my main point is that it's not black and white. I'm just saying that there's a hierarchy of teaching capacity for the magisterium of the church to say this is what it is that we believe as Catholics. And it's not just all or nothing. It's not like either it's a dogma or you can, you know, take it or leave it. So that was the point that I wanted to make there. But I appreciate your feedback, Pavel. Madeline says, I have heard some of your thoughts on the use of psychedelics to heal depression, but I'm wondering if there are any Catholic therapists out there that have started offering ketamine-assisted therapy. That is way off topic, but I love the question.
That's a mailbag question, everyone. Send
that was a
questions
mailbag.
mailbag.
I thought I was reading another line in thought with but Madeline, I want to come back to that question because I love the question. By the way, yes, there are out there people doing that already, so we'll come back to that.
We'll definitely come back to that. All right, so let's continue on with the Pope's interview. He also touched upon immigration. The Pope also criticized Texas officials' efforts to shut down.
Why'd you laugh?
Because I mean, he just touches on like major political issues, and he just creates this firestorm. Like he made this statement about the same-sex unions, right? Which one would hope would kind of calm the more conservative voices within the Catholic American Church, who tend to be more politically liberal. And then he goes in and criticizes immigration policies. So he says the Pope criticized Texas officials' efforts to shut down a Catholic charity that offers undocumented immigrants humanitarian assistance as part of a wider crackdown at the state's border with Mexico. This is madness, he says. Sheer madness. To close the border and leave them there, this is madness. The migrant has to be received. Therefore, you see how you are going to deal with him. Maybe you have to send him back. I don't know. But each case ought to be considered humanely. Like, what is your immigration? Like, why are you speaking on immigration? I mean, I guess the church, he has an obligation to talk about immigration.
Can I say something here in general? I think this is the thing. I'm just noticing this in myself right now. Like
yes.
And this is where parts theory, parts talk gets to be really useful. Like, part of me thinks that Pope Francis is not a good person. part
of me thinks he's a genius, or part of me thinks he's not very smart at all.
No, I don't think he's a genius at all. Like, no part of me thinks he's a genius. Part of me thinks that it's very possible that the, you know, when we talk about like the smoke of Satan has entered the church,
mm-hmm.
Part of me is like, yeah, it's very clear. It's right here in front of us. But is it not possible to still hold the part that is like, but what is our duty as Catholics? What is our actual faith? And again, I said this before, but it's like, if we were at the time of the anti-Christ, anti-Pope, whatever people talk about, it would be apocalyptic. Maybe we're in that time right now.
Well, there's blue meteors flying through the atmosphere in Portugal right now.
Oh gosh, there's always been blue meteors in Portugal. Like, there. These are
You go back and forth on this. You say it's the end times. I say it's not.
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm saying it. Part of me thinks it might be. That's like a much more different statement. But at the same time, can't we also act as if our Pope is the vicar of Christ and still maintain our duty? But what I think is the problem is that people feel like they have to have the answer, and they have to be like early on figuring it out. It's like, well, I called it. If you look at my YouTube video in 2012, I said this was going to happen, and now it's like, okay, what do you want for that? Like, if we're in the end times, and it's you want likes, you want more subscribers on YouTube, like, what exactly? If we're in the end times, it was a great movie, The Big Short.
It's been a while. I don't really.
Oh gosh, The Big Short. It's like, oh god, it's such a good movie. And you've got what's his name? Who's the actor? Who's Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt is one of the guys. Mm-hmm. And Brad Pitt, he calls what's going to happen in the housing market. And
Are you sure it's Brad Pitt? Oh yeah, okay, I see.
Yeah, Brad Pitt is. There's three sets of finance people who knew what was going to happen with because they could read the writing on the wall, right? So Brad Pitt makes one of the gutsiest moves out of all three, and he ends up shorting the whole housing market essentially. And there's a move that they make that's so ballsy that they end up they're positioned to win like 200-1. Everybody else is like 20-1. And they get people to go along with their buy-in on this short. And so he's walking with these two interns, and they're at a casino because they had made the deals there. And they're walking out, and these two guys are like young kids, and they're like laughing and dancing and joking, and they're like, we did it. We did it. And Brad Pitt turns around him. He's like, what is wrong with you? And he's like about to cry. And they're like, what? We're going to make 200-1 on this. And he looks at them and he goes, if we are right, people lose their houses. People lose their jobs. People are going to be homeless and hungry. This culture, our whole societal fabric is going to fall apart if we're right, if we get 200-1 on this.
Oh, you're saying he's gaslighting them?
No, he's not. What he's saying is he did what he had to do because he's a finance guy, and he's like, yeah, we're gonna play this odd. Yes. And we're gonna. But if we're right and we win, it's because the entire housing market is about to crash. Mm-hmm. And then they're looking and they're like, we're just doing what you told us to do.
Right? How am I supposed to feel?
And then he looks at him. He goes, just don't dance. And they leave the casino. It was like one of the greatest lines in the movie. He's like, just don't dance.
Right.
So, okay.
So the analogy with the Pope and the end times
Raymond Arroyo. Let's say that you're Taylor Marshall. Let's say that you're whoever these like anti-Francis people are, and you got your YouTube channels and you got all this stuff and you've been calling it. It's like you're calling the apocalypse.
Yeah, if you're right, don't dance.
What do you want? Cookie? Like,
yeah.
Just don't dance. Like, but the way people talk about Francis or the way people try to call this stuff, it's with such pride and hubris. It's like, sorry, you're not going to have an EWTN network anymore if we're in the apocalypse. Like, you should probably, if you really believe that that's where we're at in history, you should probably getting your house in order a little bit more than you actually are, or at least what appears to be on social media public optics that you're putting out there.
So do you believe them then? Do you believe the Raymond Arroyos and Dr. Taylor Marshall, or do you think that it's all just an attempt to gain views and
part of me was really nervous about Y2K. Mm-hmm. Part of me was nervous about 2017 when I had a whole theory about the 100 years of Satan and Our Lady of Fatima and the 100 years that Pope Leo XIII heard about from the devil. And I believe that those things all lined up. I still kind of believe they probably line up. Mm-hmm. Part of me does believe all this stuff, but it doesn't mean we have to go all in on this stuff and become super blended with like one perspective and then start acting like everything that comes out of Pope Francis' mouth is from the Antichrist.
Sure. He also fans the flames of their criticism against him. His lines about conservatives here targets these people that are in opposition to him personally. And the language he uses is quite inflammatory. Can I read that?
Sure.
In an interview with 60 Minutes airing this Sunday, Pope Francis takes aim at his conservative critics. So there's all the people you just mentioned, plus bishops, et cetera, in the United States, reportedly saying a conservative is someone who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition, because it is one thing to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past, but quite another to be closed up inside a dogmatic box. I mean, to say it's a suicidal attitude, he's basically suggesting that he's going to go to war with them, right? Like, they're committing suicide by being critical of his views.
I mean, again, that's like a media inflammatory like way to wrap up his words. Like that's clickbait.
But he used the word suicidal. How else would you interpret that?
I would interpret how would you interpret that as a psychologist? If somebody is cemented in their view and they have like no flexibility or adaptability, is that a person with a psyche
I call them stubborn, inflexible. I wouldn't say they're suicidal.
I could say psychologically that's a part of our whole model of health, is that adaptability and flexibility are a part of health, and cementing in non-flexibility, non-adaptability is a mark of illness.
But would you use that term? Would you say that they have a suicidal attitude? Someone inflexible has a suicidal attitude.
But
on national television.
This is my point.
In response to people criticizing him.
This is my point. If John Paul II, who was beloved and brilliant and a hero of every culture, used that word, people would interpret it totally differently. They would find a way to hear it in a positive way. And you could be like, yeah, of course. I mean, that's definitely a kind of spiritual suicide. It's kind of a psychological suicide. Like you're like cutting yourself off from the life-giving breath of the Holy Spirit, which is constantly creative and looking for ways to, like, we would go on and on, ways to understand and defend that.
So this sounds like you're saying, like, when we're working with a couple and they have negative sentiment override.
100% negative sentiment override.
So we work with couples. We have a husband and wife that come in, and for a time, no matter what the spouse says, it's wrong, or it'll 100%. Be filtered through a certain lens.
It's a perfect connection point right
and
there.
Expectations, right? And then what we try to do to help them is build some more positive experience to flip the switch, to cross the threshold of more positive, unconditional positive regard, right? So where someone screws up, you give them the benefit of the doubt. So you're saying that we had positive sentiment override for JP2, but we have negative sentiment override for Pope Francis. So no matter what he says, he can't win.
Correct.
Okay. Did he not contribute to that negative sentiment override?
What principles do we use in marital therapy? That's not how we look at it or talk about it. It's not up to the spouse to stop contributing to negative sentiment override.
Sure it is.
There's positive things that they can do to take away from that. But the statement itself is not the thing that's going to fix it. It's not like he's contributing to negative sentiment override. It's already being judged as wrong.
Right, but the spirit in the air is one of sentiment override, right?
If somebody had positive sentiment override, they could have listened to that same statement and felt completely differently about it.
Right, but it's the responsibility of both parties to contribute on flipping the narrative and getting it more positive. Right?
Yeah, so by him correcting his view on same-sex unions, that would be him contributing to positive sentiment override.
It's a good step.
And you got to have 5 to 1, right? He's got to have 5 positives to every 1 negative. So
yeah, but he's like 1 to 4 here. That's the problem. What I'm saying, the immigration issues.
He's not doing it. He's not cutting it for marital therapy for sure.
And his spouse is
It's obviously
church.
the church.
The church.
Of course. But this is okay. This is why no part of me thinks he's intelligent or genius. Like no part of me thinks and that's why a lot of parts of me don't think he's good.
Because he's not intelligent? What does that mean? Can you clarify that?
No.
Only
What I'm saying is it contributes to me thinking that also he's just like not good. Like you just make statements that are not good. He's making actions that are not good. He's not consistent. He's not coherent. He's not like, if you're saying like, oh, is he a good leader of the church? I would say no, he's a bad leader.
He's a bad leader. A bad leader and a bad person are different things though, right?
I don't know him personally. I'm not talking about his personal life.
You're not, but people are. People
Right,
are saying he's a bad person.
If somebody knows him personally and they have something to say about him, number one, the first question is it appropriate to even be talking about somebody's personal characteristics? Number two, to what end are you talking about their personal characteristics? Number three, I'd be like, have you followed the gospel directive to like go talk to the person? If you're saying something negative about somebody's personality characteristics, did you go to them first about it? Did you like?
I can't call him. I can't text him.
This is my point. It's not any of your business. It's not any of these people's business. Like the way people are talking about our Pope is not okay. People are not discerning and mature and actually like thoughtful about. That's why I hate social media. That's why I hate the media so much.
Hold on. In the abstract, I agree with you, but you don't think people are going to have a certain standard that the vicar of Christ should live up to as the representative of Christ on earth, the one person? People are going to look at his moral character, of course, right?
Being judged against what data points?
What do you mean?
What is there's a standard, yes, a standard expectation. Okay, so if you know that you have a data point that he's committing some sin that is against the standards we'd expect of the vicar of Christ, that's a serious situation. And then I would say, like, how does this person come to know this knowledge? Is this actually happening? Has this person confronted the Pope himself? Has this gone to the next appropriate authority? Like what? Otherwise, you and I talking about it on a talk show or anybody else talking about it on a talk show, it's not appropriate. That's what I'm saying, that I'm making that distinction between personal characteristic versus like leadership characteristics. Okay, that's a different category. I think we can absolutely talk about his leadership characteristics. So that's where I feel totally comfortable and justified saying I think he's a bad leader. Like that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I still think he's the vicar of Christ, and I would afford him every honor and reverence due to the vicar of Christ.
Right.
But the complexity of this world and our faith is that he could be both a human and the vicar of Christ. And in fact, that's the definition. And he could be a really bad leader. He could also be a really bad human. I don't know him.
Yeah, I mean, I think people today are just assuming the worst from our leaders. They're sooner or later we find out anyone that we look up to as a model and as a leader has some kind of skeletons in their closet, or they just kind of disappoint us over time. And that's the general disposition we have towards people in a position of leadership. And even if there's someone we do trust, there's people that don't like that person, and they're going to highlight all the mistakes and failings and shortcomings of the person that we want to follow. And I don't think the Pope is exempt from that. And I think it's amplified by the fact, amplified by his office. I mean, you can say the same thing is true about priests, right? Do we, what kind of standard did we naturally hold priests to? A higher standard than other people, right? Is that fair? I think your argument is like, that's not fair. We don't know about their personal lives, but I think it's natural. Maybe it's a projection of hoping that the vicar of Christ or a priest or a bishop or a religious or our mom and dad are God, and they're not, and they're going to fall short. But it's still a natural part of our experience as we're longing for God that we're going to place these really high expectations on them. And if any kind of chink in the armor or crack in the armor is going to mean that we're going to just black and white criticize them and dismantle people's perceptions of who they are. Yeah, I think the higher you go, like the more susceptible someone is to that criticism.
I just would call people to be more sort of intelligent and mature about the whole thing. Of course it happens, but even in that, like, it's very nuanced. There's a lot of different ways to look at, like, priests are held to a higher standard, as they should be. But again, it's like, what are we actually complaining about in the priesthood? So there's a difference between saying, like, I really didn't like Father's homily,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's like, or it's like the priest has got like nuns at the altar, and or like Susan so and so from the parish council is like elevating the Eucharist, and they're all holding it's like, what standard are we talking about? Like, are we talking, or if it's like scandalous and it's actually something evil and sinful, like, that's a whole nother level.
Sure.
So it's just, there's more to the conversation but people do paint this black and white, like, really simple, like, mindless, sort of opinion that ends up coloring everything that we hear or think about.
I don't think we have very much, if any, evidence on his moral character being problematic.
Well, some
Like,
people do think they do, and they do talk about it, but they don't. I don't. Again, I just don't. I don't want to even entertain the conversation.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm not really arguing with you. I know it may sound like I'm arguing with you. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just wish that there is a way in which he just wasn't as inflammatory as he was. He didn't make statements that could be so open to interpretation that we as a Catholic Church in the United States are divided over this man we need leadership more than ever before.
Yes.
That's what's upsetting to me.
I agree. And that's why I say out of touch, because actually, I mean, this is the other piece of it that I'm always a little bit curious about, because I mean, I've spent time with Latino culture, and when I was a friar, we lived in the South Bronx with a lot of people from different Latino cultures, and it's very present and very obvious that that Francis is from Argentina, and I don't know to what extent the cultural influence. I don't know when he uses a word like suicide,
what that means.
What, like, he's culture. He's being poetic. Maybe he's being like,
that's fair.
He's being interpretive. It's like, I hear that as an American, as an English speaking American, like, I'm like a mental health person. I'm like, suicide. What is he talking about? It's like, okay, that's my one very narrow little slice of cultural experience, but like, he could be meaning something entirely different by what we're hearing. And I just like to try to figure out where people are actually coming from before jumping to some like conclusion that even in that statement he's being really inflammatory.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I worked with a Hispanic priest once, and he was talking about growth in the spiritual life and virtue building, and he said, we have this phrase in Spanish, which I don't think it's interpreted well in English, but to grow in the spiritual life, we want to commit violence against our will.
There you go.
He's like, I don't think that comes across the way it's intended to in the native tongue.
Yeah, and that exactly. I mean, that's a great example, because that's another example. Like, English-speaking people who read that in some translation from some saint think they actually have to create violence against themselves. Like, all of a sudden, then like all this like self-flagellation and mortification takes on this really dark kind of turn, and we don't realize how much. I was thinking about this with a reading from this week. One of the readings from the week, it was St. Paul talking about the flesh and the spirit. And maybe this was yesterday's reading, but it's like, we can't follow the flesh and the spirit. When we follow the flesh, it leads to all of this sin, and we have to follow the life in the spirit. And it's like, in our culture, which we are so split as if body and spirit are two different things, we think living according to the flesh means living according to our biology.
Right.
That's not what St. Paul meant.
Not at all. No.
But so anyway.
All right. Anything else you want to add on Pope Francis today?
We got to pray for this guy. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope we're not in the apocalypse, but if we are, maybe we are. And I don't know. I just keep waiting for the triumph of the Immaculate Heart. We're supposed to have this like beautiful springtime after the 100 years that were given to Satan. We're supposed to have like all this like wonderful, beautiful life here. It's like, I mean, I can't wait for heaven. I mean, I know it's going to be beyond I can see what eye sees and ear hears, but
Sure.
it'd be cool to just like be here during a springtime instead of
Yeah.
this absolute garbage.
Yeah. Here, Nick Medley comments, I think Pope Francis needs to surround himself with better people so they can give better information. I imagine he hears from his advisors that the West just contradicts his authority. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, in the same way, what he says is filtered through the media. What the bishops say is probably all like also filtered through the media as it makes its way to his desk.
I mean, exactly. But the other, and also to the point, I guess I'm sort of flip-flopping here, and I don't, this is not a mark on him personally, but from what I hear from enough people who work in or in around the Vatican, like his administrative style is pretty authoritarian.
This is very interesting, given his general disposition.
Right. So, when it comes to like surrounding himself from advisors, I don't think any advisor who ventures to dispute or go against, it's like, well, Trump should surround himself with people who give a better sense of what the other side thinks. It's like, I don't think that's happening. I think there's just as much chance for Pope Francis to surround himself with.
Yes, man.
Yeah. I think they're probably both in the same page in a lot of ways. I'll leave it at that.
All right. I want to be sensitive to time here. We're going long on a lot of these issues. Omar says authoritarian from Latin America? Really? Laugh out loud. That's funny. So, okay. Do you want to talk about marijuana, alternating reality? All right, I'll give you those two to choose from. You want to talk about?
Well, marijuana is a great segue. At least I can touch back to Madeline. Madeline, if you send us an email, I can give you some providers who I know are providing ketamine assisted therapy from a Catholic perspective. So send me an email, and if you can, what's our email? mailbag@catholicpsych.com.
Yeah. Put the word mailbag. Still. Yeah, put the word mailbag in the subject heading so we can make sure it goes to its proper place.
So this is my general thoughts on all the things medical and medicinal and the above.
You need a frame.
Absolute atrocity that cannabis is being legalized, is becoming more recreationally accepted. It's being rescheduled as a different level of drug, so that if there's
lower risk drug.
Yep.
Reclassified marijuana as a lower risk drug, short of decriminalization. The proposal, and it's a 2-month comment period, would expand researchers' access to marijuana and allow cannabis producers to deduct business expenses for their tax returns.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, if you have a medical business, or if you're trying to do business in a way that's actually helping people for more than a recreational reason, then that's great. But the distinction needs to be medical. And if we have, I don't, this is happening with psychedelics too, which is a big problem. But the fact of the matter is, research is deeply affected by the laws. And so, when cannabis was just on the block for being medically accepted, there was a profound amount of research that was getting done, and really amazing discoveries were being made, and an understanding of cannabis as a medical tool coming out. But as soon as the recreational laws start to get put in place, the impetus for all the medical research decreases. So that's why this is really important, that we maintain. There's a tremendous amount of potential for medical cannabis. There's a tremendous amount of potential for medical psychedelics, and we have to keep it in its lane. When I know there's like a libertarian argument about people should just have access to make their own decisions about these substances, and these are natural and all this stuff. It's like, if we were still talking about the kind of marijuana that grew on the mountainside and whatever, it's like, and you just want to have like some kind of indigenous freedom to just go pick the weeds and roll it up and smoke it. Like,
no, that's not what they make in labs nowadays.
That's not what's happening. So these things are become medicalized and then recreationalized. It's like, that's a real problem.
Yeah.
And the psychedelics too. It's like, there are cultural use of these things that I think shouldn't be touched, but we've completely taken over these indigenous uses, then turned it into something it's not, and now are trying to promote its use, which is disastrous. So anyway, it's a much more nuanced conversation. There's a lot more to it, but those are my 2 cents.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that there is a context in which it's controlled, and marijuana could be used for therapeutic purposes, perhaps even in the world of mental health, not just in the world of, not just in the medical world, but it's such commonplace to abuse marijuana, that how could you even bring someone into that environment in which it's safe and secure for them to use it?
What do you think?
I mean, I think there's associations with marijuana as well. I think there's because of the recreational nature of drug use, there's so much association that is brought into a therapeutic context, and it's difficult to shake that. I think the same is possibly true of some of these psychedelics, where, like, yes, you can put someone in a controlled environment to create safety and use it for therapeutic purposes, but because it exists outside of that safe space, it's difficult to leave all that stuff at the door when you're providing a medical or therapeutic intervention.
Yeah,
that's my concern.
No, that's a big part of it. I think so too.
But if it was illegal, like for recreational purposes, and I mean, here's another question: is like, I mean, making it legal, does it really change how much people smoke pot? I mean, it was illegal when I was growing up,
though. But I do think there's a lot more people smoking pot now. Also, so? I just thought of this too. This is kind of, maybe this is off color, but back in the day, I mean, when it was illegal, and then people were, obviously still doing it. But you ever meet like one of those potheads who is like, actually has like a doctorate in weed?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's people that are just like,
I have met them. Yes.
When it's illegal, it pushes it's like almost like, and maybe it's a good or bad thing. I don't know if it's a good or bad, but for whatever it's worth, it pushes an understanding of what is going on to another level. Mm-hmm. And there's almost like a reverence for the thing because of this is like part of why sacred things should be like limited and reserved. This is like an argument for the altar rail. It's like, it creates a psychological sense of like reverence, otherness
of the thing. Yeah.
Of the thing. And so now it's like people are dabbling in this stuff. There's just no clue what they're doing.
Yeah.
And people are showing up at head shops and weed shops and just like whatever. And it's like, nobody has any clue what they're doing. And I'm not saying people used to like across the board, but the expertise is unnecessary when availability is so widespread.
Fair enough. Let's hop on this last story real quick. TikTokers swear that they can shift to alternate realities in viral videos. What is going on? So people on TikTok swear by reality shifting, where you can shift your consciousness to an alternate reality. It's like forced dissociation here.
Tell me why I should hate social media without telling me I should hate social media.
There's so much to learn here. Others say that they have husbands in other realities. Others say they have children. Others say they've actually gone to worlds from Marvel to Harry Potter. It's called reality shifting. It's become popular on TikTok, where users claim that through various mind techniques, they are able to transport their consciousness to other realities. I mean, this is what people are doing. They're dissociating. They're so unhappy with their lives that they're using thought techniques and mindful techniques to transport themselves via dissociation to other psychological experiences that they're naming as alternative realities. These could be realities, could be anything, including different time periods, fictional worlds from popular franchises. Some of these videos have millions of views and plenty of sincere comments from people inquiring how they can learn to reality shift.
So first of all, TikTok, like, to put it in context, like, I've heard like 1 million views on TikTok is really like worth like maybe 1,000 views. So, but besides that, cue the anti-mindfulness crowd. Like,
Right.
what? This is the whole point. Same thing with medical stuff. Same thing with the drugs. It's like, you could use things that are true about the human in ways that are really disastrous, whether we're talking about worship and using Taylor Swift music, or drugs that we're promoting or not.
Dissociative processes to escape the present moment.
100%.
Yeah.
It's really sad. It's just another sad indication of where people are at right now.
Now, if you could reality shift, which world would you send yourself to? Fictional or a different time period? Where would you send yourself to?
Oh man. You know, I remember growing up, I used to sort of fantasize about being in the woods and being like in the time of the Native Americans, like in our country, like 1400s, 1500s, maybe, I don't know. Like, I just love a lot of things about just the, Native American history, and being in a place where you're living off the land and sort of connected to nature. And obviously before I learned about all this sort of like violence and aggression. And
I just watched 1883, which is the prequel to the Yellowstone series with Kevin Costner.
Oh yeah.
It is a violent, frightening world.
Yeah.
on the Oregon Trail.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we don't want to idealize it too much. I mean, the show does a great job of like juxtaposing the like interweaving the beauty of that world with the violence and danger of that world, and like mingling it together.
Yeah.
But let's not go black and white with it. It was a dark, difficult time.
Yeah, certainly.
But in your world, in your reality shifting world, it could be all like peace and harmony.
Yeah, I could also have superpowers, right? I could be like Iron Man in 1883.
You could. You could. Yeah, I mean, bringing it full circle to the Taylor Swift, like people are just unhappy. People are unhappy with their lives. They're unhappy with the world that they live in, and they're looking for ways to escape the space that we're in. And it's sad and tragic. And I mean, this is creative and imaginative, and it's probably a stress reducing coping mechanism. But I'm like, from a professional standpoint, I'm actually very interested in what techniques are used that are powerful enough. It's like hypnosis, right? To transport someone in their mind to a whole nother world where they actually believe they're in that world for a time. I mean, it's like I would think you would need virtual reality glasses to be.
I mean, who knows what their actual experience of it? Who knows? Who knows? It could be self-hypnosis. I mean, I saw some comments about people are like afraid of getting stuck in the alternate reality.
Yeah.
I mean, people, like, I don't know. People are just, it's very unsophisticated misuse of human realities because of how unhappy they are. It's, it's just substitute recreational marijuana.
Well, how can people be happy, Greg? We're talking about all the ways, evidence that people are unhappy.
Subscribe and follow for more episodes.
We will make you happy.
Share our show with all your friends.
We're going to be live in 100,000 seat stadium soon. Come. We're not your gurus.
We're going to try to do Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, right?
We're going to try. Yeah, we're going to try to do Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. I don't know if that's an official announcement yet. Is it official?
I mean, we're trying it.
We're trying it Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Oh gosh, we got a show.
I want to be more conscious of bringing in, human interest stories, positivity, palate cleansers. Happy Gilmore 2 is coming out, folks. There's a new trailer.
Listen, anything you tee up for me, by the way. Tee up. Haha. Anything you
Yeah.
tee up for me to hit it with an anti-social media context, I'm gonna definitely take a swing.
I think if I bring up any social media context, you're going to turn it into anti-social media context.
I mean, that's just basically what I'm sitting here immersed in social media, and I can't stand it. But I know a lot of our audience feels the same way. So
A lot
anyway,
of them do. Yes.
we got to wrap it up for today, folks. Great to spend time with you. Sorry I couldn't get to all the comments, but I love seeing the comments. You guys are awesome. And until next time, maybe Wednesday.
We'll see you Wednesday at
See you
11
then.
a.m. Eastern.